I'm almost embarrassed to tell you how long this piece of furniture has been living in my shed, because it has definitely been over 2 years, at least. I purchased it for approximately $25, and it has been sitting on its side in my shed for years. Well, I think it's because it's a laminate desk. And when I look at a laminate desk, I know that structurally this piece is sound. I just know there's extra steps in my prep, and that means more work. So it needs to get done, but I dragged it inside and took it apart. There are some hardware pieces that are broken on this piece, but I think we can mismatch them up to make them all work for the sides of the drawers. I'll just add a different piece to the top drawer. She is dusty, she is dirty, but she's actually pretty darn cute. So let's get to work. Obviously, first things first, remove all of the existing hardware and clean the entire piece inside and out with White Lightning. White Lightning, Pristine Clean, or Terra Clean are basically all the same product. Reusing as much hardware as possible on these pieces is always a great idea to save your pennies. So I will have enough hardware for the 2 columns, and I will add a Woodubend to the top drawer and create a new drawer pull. As always, remember, watch out for creepy crawlies. But I am not afraid of spiders. I'm afraid of snakes, but not spiders. So let's get to work. This Woodubend is actually broken, which happens often with Woodubends because when they are not hot, that means they are rigid and hard. Don't worry, you can just stick it back together when you glue it on and you won't even know. I think this will work well for covering the hole. So let's talk a little bit about prep. Proper prep saves the day always. This is a laminate style plastic desk. This is not solid wood. This is some sort of laminate over particle board. That means an extra step in my prep. This means Bonding Boss in gray. I'm going to apply 2 even coats with a roller because a roller is quick and it makes my job easy, and we will wait 24 hours for this to get dry. And it allows me to simply throw that roller in the garbage when I am finished because I do not want to wash my Bonding Boss down the drain. Remember, this is an adhesion gripping primer. I don't want to clog up my pipes. Next up is choosing your color palette. I'm going to base this entire piece around a transfer. The transfer is called my Favorite Bouquet. So after filling in the holes on that top drawer, I'm going to come in and paint the entire piece in dried sage. Why am I painting it all in dried sage? Well, this is going to give me a nice base for an ombre blend. You can also see on the sides of the piece, I did add a slight raised stencil in the Victorian damask. The raised stencil design is just going to add a little bit more flair to this design and give it a bit more detail on the sides of the piece. After this one solid color has dried, we are going to do an ombre blend. The reason I like to do an ombre blend over top of a solid color is just the ability to use less paint. If I have a nice strong base color that's similar to the colors that I will be applying to this desk, it's just going to allow me to do the ombre blend in less layers. Applying the paint over top of the raised stencil is going to lock in that raised stencil as well, so that when I use my best dang brush over top, it will be easier to blend and not remove any of the raised stencil design. Our Woodubend molding. These are super simple to apply. Flip it over and then apply your wood glue. I like to use wood glue. Remember, this is a wood product. Once the wood glue is on your piece, you can heat it up and then stick it directly on. It doesn't matter if you apply your wood glue before you heat it or after. It really depends on how thick your molding is. This particular Woodubend molding is no longer available on the Dixie Belle paint page, but in the description below I will link the Woodubend website along with a 10% off coupon if you'd like to find one similar. Simply fit those 2 broken Woodubend bits together and glue them onto your piece. You can use tape to hold it if you need to, and then paint directly over. All right, let's start our little ombre blend. Collard greens, morning sunrise, pink champagne. Sounds crazy? It's not crazy. It's actually going to create a really pretty soft and purple blend for this entire desk. I know majority of this paint is going to be covered with a transfer, but I still want to see that beautiful ombre color below. Using my best dang brush when it's a little bit damp to pull those colors together. It's a really simple way, using small circular motions, to get that ombre blend happening in a soft smoky look. And I repeated the same color pattern across the sides as well. So coming in with the darker colored greens around the edges, moving in with a little bit of that dried sage into that morning sunrise, and of course the pink champagne. And then using the best dang brush to circle blend it all together. Doing that small circular motion creates a little bit of texture as well, which is always nice on this paint. Wiping off your brush as you go along to remove the excess amounts of paint and working in from dark into light. If you find that your brush gets a little bit of a drag to it or you feel it pulling, that just means that it's not wet enough. Wipe it off, redamp your brush, and then continue to circle blend the colors together. If you choose colors that are similar in value, it's going to be a lot easier to blend your paint than maybe say using a green and a purple, which would be super hard to pull together because they're not on the same color value scale. So stay within your color scale of light to dark and the same kind of neutrally colors, and you'll find that blending is super easy. And if you're still having trouble grasping how to do a simple ombre blend, I have about 1,000,000,005 tutorials here on YouTube that you can peruse and find one that works for you. I have short form, long form, and like full talking format videos. I definitely have a video for you. If you can't find what you're looking for, reach out to me and I'll point you in the right direction. I added some stripes to the tops of these drawers. Again, still knowing I'm probably going to cover most of this with a transfer, I wanted it to be able to peek through. Moonshine Metallics and Steel Magnolia over top of that beautiful color is a perfect combo. Up next, the transfer. This is a bells and whistles transfer. This one is called My Favorite Bouquet. It is giant. It's huge. You could put together all 4 image sheets and create one massive image on the front of your project. For this look, I'm going to use 2 pieces of transfer, maybe 3, and overlap them on the drawer fronts. I'm also going to be adding little bits and parts of this stencil to really like fill in the blanks and pull the space together. For the Silkscreen Stencil, I will be using Moonshine Metallics and the same color as the stripes, which is that beautiful Steel Magnolia color. Let's dive into how to make a seamless join on 2 pieces of transfer. I get a lot of questions about this. It seems to be difficult for a lot of people. I suggest cutting your transfer as close to the edge as possible. This will make it easier to match up and not have an overlap of any extra plastic. Once you've laid down your initial piece, you're going to peel off the backing on the second item. Gently get as close as possible without allowing it to stick to your project to line up the images. Once you feel like you've got it exactly where it needs to be, as close to the lineup as possible, start from that seam and push outwards. It's going to remove any bubbles and make sure that that little line stays exactly where you want it to go. Here is a handy dandy tip. Now remember, you've removed the edge of the transfer with the excess plastic, right? When you cut it to size. So put a piece of paper over top or a sheet of plastic and use that to kind of brush down your transfer rather than pushing on the transfer directly and taking the chance of scratching or ripping it. You're going to come in now and use the enclosed burnishing tool as careful as you can around those tiny little edges, and you can see that transfer release. See where the color kind of changes from really vibrant to kind of cloudy? That means that the image has released off of the plastic and is now onto your project. Personally, I like to kind of go around all of the edges first. You can also see that I laid down a piece of blue painter's tape so that I wouldn't overlap any of the areas where I don't want the transfer to stick. And then you're going to keep going until you get that complete transfer down and onto your project. You can see your transfers with clear coat or wax on the top of a desk like this. I suggest clear coat in satin. So I used 2 panels of the transfer on the top of the desk. Now I'm going to use 1 transfer sheet for each side of the columns. This is going to cover the exact size of the desk. You're going to cut it along the lines where the desk would open because there's actually a piece of material in between on the actual vanity. cut very gently along the edges so that you don't rip the transfer. This is still a fragile creature. You don't want to pull apart those drawers without cutting it because it might pull off the transfer where you laid it down. Continue along and do the other set of drawers on the column, working away until I had both covered entirely. When you put the drawers in, keep the same order as you laid your transfer down for continuity. This transfer, My Favorite Bouquet, is from the 2024 release. It is really pretty and it might be one of my favorites. It is giant though, so if you do only use a couple sheets, you're definitely going to have a lot left over for other projects. Continuing along and adding the same transfer to the other side of the desk. You might note on this transfer that it does look like these flowers go in a certain direction. Keep that in mind. I wanted mine to aim up, similar to what I'm laying them down in this pattern. I'm now going to come in and add the rest of the Silkscreen Stencil around the transfer. I haven't sealed my transfer at this point, so remember when you do apply your Silkscreen Stencil that you're going to want to put some sort of protective paper down over top of your transfer. Silkscreen Stencils are a little bit sticky on the back and you don't want it to pull up all of your hard work. Spray paint to my hardware to get everything matchy-matchy, including the new knob that'll go on the middle. And then here comes my protective paperwork. I actually just used the back of one of the transfer sheets to mimic the shape of the transfer so I wouldn't pull up any of that image when I applied my Silkscreen Stencil. I drilled a new hole directly through that Woodubend and put all of the hardware back on my piece. And FYI, this piece was sealed 100% in satin clear coat to protect my work. This boring brown laminate desk had a complete transformation. With a little bit of ombre paint and that beautiful transfer, it is totally ready for a new home. I took this piece to my booth space at the Lazy Daisy here in Richmond, Virginia, and within 1 week it went to a new home. And I received the cutest picture of a little girl putting this in her brand new decorated room. What a fancy and fabulous way for her to make over her space. I found a really cool bench and painted it to match and added a faux fur seat, which is always my go-to when it comes to these whimsical pieces. I love the vibe that it gives, very princess. So the next time you find a ugly laminate style desk that you think has no hope, remember this video and give it a try. I know that you can do this makeover as well. All you need is a little bit of bonding boss and some TLC.